may be seated. Shabbat Shalom. So, I have a confession. I love calendars. Does anybody else love calendars? It's pretty fun to look through a calendar. Now, I will tell you, partly, I'm connected to my calendar just out of sheer busyness, and I have to make sure I know where everything is so not to miss an appointment. But even beyond that, I'm fascinated by time, by the marking of time, and really just by looking at each and every day, and how history and Hallmark have imbued each and every day with significance. I'm fascinated by how history and Hallmark have imbued each and every day with special significance. Of course, we start with today, May 9th, which really has become significant and will go down in history as Hallie and Ryan's Bar Bar Mitzvah days. It's also the 35th day of the Omer, which is exactly 5 weeks of the Omer. So that means that it's 2 weeks until Shavuot. But not only is it 2 weeks until Shavuot, but because we know Shavuot falls on Memorial Day weekend this year, we also know from today that it's 2 weeks until Memorial Day. Which means, of course, that it's then almost summer. Now, today doesn't just stand alone. It marks what has come before and what has come after. And often we know the beauty of today, the significance of today, because of what came before and what came after. And, of course, how history and Hallmark have imbued those days as well. So if we look back to this past Thursday, what was significant about this past Thursday? It was Lag BaOmer. This past Thursday was Lag BaOmer. And so it was a day in which I got to get a haircut, which is not that significant. But it's also the day we mark when 2,000 years ago a plague that spread through the disciples of Rabbi Akiva was lifted for a brief moment. That's right, according to the Talmud, it says that Rabbi Akiva, one of the greatest rabbis ever, had 24,000 students. Or as the Talmud says, he had 12,000 pairs of disciples. Because of course they engaged in Torah study, each of them learning one with the other. So he had 12,000 pairs of disciples. And during this period of the Omer, during this period that we count right now between Passover and Shavuot, where we count each and every day, quite literally up to 49, and then the 50th is the holiday of Shavuot, in which we celebrate the giving of the Torah. During that period, a terrible plague came and hit the disciples of Rabbi Akiva. 24,000 students of Torah were killed. The Talmud comes to say, why were these 24,000 students, these 12,000 Chavruta pairs, why were they killed? Because they didn't respect each other. Because even though they studied Torah together, they didn't truly respect each other. But on Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer, that plague was lifted for a brief day. And because of that, the 33rd day of the Omer, Lag BaOmer has come down for the last 2,000 years as a day of celebration and joy, a day of weddings and haircuts. It's a day of celebration. So that was this past Thursday, Lag BaOmer. Anybody know what yesterday was? Yesterday, Friday, was VE Day. It was the 70th anniversary of the Allies' victory in Europe over the Nazis during World War II, and really came to mark, by and large, the end to a good portion of the war. All of us, we give thanks for being part of this country. We owe it in so many ways to the veterans who served our great nation with distinction, many of whom sit in our congregation today. Yesterday was VE Day. 70 years ago, we defeated evil. 70 years ago, the Jewish people went from near destruction to starting to rebuild again. So Thursday was Lag BaOmer. Yesterday was VE Day. Today is Hallie and Ryan's bar mitzvah day. Shabbos of Emor, the 35th day of the Omer. And tomorrow, of course, should be no surprise to anyone. Tomorrow is Mother's Day. Perhaps the holiest day of the year. And so it is fascinating how we look at the calendar and how we note how each and every day is imbued by either history or hallmark with significance. But we note how each and every day calls us to live a life of meaning, of purpose. And each of those significant days should drive us to do something holier, should force us to reflect on the choices we make and how they impact not only ourselves, but the world around us and the world yet to come. I'll invite you to turn with me in your Eitz Chaim Kumashim, your read Torah commentaries. We are now in Parashat Emor, and I'm going to be on page 728. Page 728. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, Parashat Emor, a better part of it, really is consumed with marking the calendar, with marking time. And it starts with the first day of the Jewish year as our ancestors understood it, which was the first day of the Hebrew month of Nisan. And it goes 2 weeks later, the 15th of Nisan, we mark Pesach. And of course, immediately after we begin Pesach, we then begin counting the Omer. And all of that is found in this week's Torah portion. And now beginning with the second night Seder, we count each and every night, 49 nights, until we get to the holiday of Shabbat. And the Torah marks through each and every day of the ancient calendar, from Pesach to Shavuot, ultimately to Rosh Hashanah, and then to that holiday that falls on the 10th day of the 7th month, which we call Tishrei. What holiday falls on the 10th day of the 7th month? Yom Kippur. And so on page 728, we read of Yom Kippur. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Mark the 10th day of this month is the Day of Atonement." So on what day of Tishrei is Yom Kippur? The 10th. "It shall be a sacred occasion for you. You shall practice self-denial," which our rabbis come to teach us is the origin of the mitzvah of fasting on Yom Kippur. "And you shall bring a gift to the Lord," which is translated by the rabbis as spend the entire day at shul. "You shall do no work throughout that day. For it is a day of atonement on which expiation is made on your behalf before the Lord your God. That is a day of our forgiveness. Indeed, any person who does not practice self-denial throughout that day shall be cut off from his kin. And whoever does any work throughout that day," God says, "I will cause that person to perish from among his people. Do no work whatever. It is a law for all time, throughout the ages, and all your settlements. It shall be a Sabbath of complete rest for you, and you shall practice self-denial." Now, on what day of the month of Tishrei does Yom Kippur fall? The 10th. So then the Torah tells us, on the 9th day of the month, at evening, from evening to evening, you shall observe this, your Sabbath. Now the rabbis ask a question, why in the beginning of what I read it says that Yom Kippur falls on the 10th day of Tishrei, the 10th day of the 7th month, yet at the very end of what we read it says to mark it beginning with the 9th day. Why the extra language, the rabbis ask? And so you'll see in the commentary that comes from the Talmud here, still on page 728. The Yom Kippur fast does not start until the evening, after sunset at night, after the 9th day. The Talmud adds, "Eating and drinking responsibly on the day before and the day after Yom Kippur are as much of a mitzvah as fasting on Yom Kippur." Eating the day before and after Yom Kippur is as much of a mitzvah as fasting on Yom Kippur. And so our Talmud comes to teach us. Each and every day matters, not just the day of the holidays, but what we do before them and what we do after them. The story is told, Rabbi Abraham Tversky repeats the story of the Baal Shem Tov, the great founder of Hasidic Jewry. And a few centuries ago, the great Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov, he appealed to God and he said, God, I know in heaven I'll have the opportunity to spend each and every day studying Torah with the great Chavruta party. Each and every day I'll be able to spend my day and study with another. Please God, the Baal Shem Tov says, please God, in this world, just show me who is that person I'm going to spend eternity with studying Torah. I want to know who this tzaddik, this righteous person is that I'm spending Torah with. So sure enough, God says to the Baal Shem Tov, I will tell you, the tzaddik, this righteous angel of a person, that you, the founder of Hasidic Jewry, will spend eternity studying Torah with. And so God led the Baal Shem Tov through one forest and into another, from one town to the next. And ultimately, the Baal Shem Tov sees that God's light shine upon a very specific house. So the Baal Shem Tov knocks on the door of the house. And who enters? Or who opens the door? A very large man with a huge beard, who had just come in from a day of chopping wood. He was schwitzy, he was unkempt, and there his axe sat next to him in his very humble house. And sure enough, this man invites the Baal Shem Tov in. The Baal Shem Tov sits down. The man offers the Baal Shem Tov a little bit of food, and they start eating together. But this man is no dainty eater. This man that the great Baal Shem Tov is supposed to spend eternity with, studying Torah, he consumes, and he consumes, and he eats tremendous volumes of food. But the Baal Shem Tov is looking at this guy and he's thinking, how on earth could this be the guy that I'm supposed to spend eternity studying Torah with? So the Baal Shem Tov says, listen, mister, I have to ask, why do you eat so much food? And the man looked at the Baal Shem Tov and he caught his eye. And he said, many, many years ago, my father was a very small man, very weak. Didn't work out, didn't exercise, didn't really enjoy eating, and so he was very thin, he was very weak. Well, one day, the Gentile community came to him and said, if you don't convert from Judaism, we're going to kill you. And this man, because of his weakness, did not have the ability to fight back. He was too weak to fight back. And so as he was about to almost actually convert out of Judaism, they killed him anyway. And so this man who was sitting across from the Baal Shem Tov, he said, ever since that day, I decided there was nobody who was going to come between me and God. There was nobody who was going to tell me to convert, and that I was going to be so afraid that I had to convert. And so each and every day, I eat as much as I can possibly eat, and I work as hard as I can possibly work so that I can be big and strong, not just for myself, but so that should anybody come and threaten me and my religion, I can defend my God. The Baal Shem Tov looked at him, and he looked up to God, and he said, now I understand why this is the man I'm destined to spend eternity learning Torah with. Here was a man, the Baal Shem Tov said, who made each and every choice one about reverence for God. Even something as mundane as eating and working, he made about God. Now we come to this period on the calendar, the Omer. This time, where on Thursday we celebrated Lag BaOmer. Yesterday we commemorated VE Day. Today we mark for all time the Bat and Bar Mitzvah of Hallie and Ryan. And of course, tomorrow is Mother's Day. And we're reminded of that teaching in the Hebrew Bible, that we should number our days, that we should gain a heart of wisdom. That like the man whom the Baal Shem Tov encountered, we should be mindful and purposeful in each and every choice we make. Because with each and every choice, we're either walking toward God or we're walking away from God. With each and every choice, we're deciding to make the world a better place or we're making the world a worse place. Because in each and every day, we have the opportunity to discover for ourselves how history and Hallmark have imbued each day, and we're challenged to do something about it. How do we live our lives knowing that 2,000 years ago a plague hit great rabbinical students because they didn't respect each other? How do we live our lives because 70 years ago our world defeated evil on the backs of brave men and women? How do we live our lives with purpose and meaning, knowing that today we mark the coming of age of a young man and a young woman? And how do we live our lives in recognition of the incredible sacrifices that our parents, mothers, and fathers made for us? How do we live our lives so that each and every day we should live lives of meaning, of purpose, of dedication to God, and of making the world a better, holier place for everyone? On this Shabbat of Parashat Emor, this 35th day of the Omer, this special day in which we celebrate the Bat and Bar Mitzvah of Hallie and Ryan, may God bless us with strength, with wisdom, to make every day and every choice count. And let us say together, Amen.